I'm 78 years old and I live in a guest house in the backyard of my own home. Well, formerly my own house. It's now my daughter Pearl's house. Her husband Woodrow considers me a burden, an extra mouth, and a mistake of nature that somehow continues to exist. He never says it outright, though, only with glances, sighs, and eye rolls when he thinks I can't see. I wake up at 6:30 every morning, a lifelong habit. 42 years I worked as a civil engineer, designing bridges and dams all over the state of North Carolina. Even in retirement, I can't bring myself to lie in bed. My Edith used to say I was born with an alarm clock inside me. Edith. It's been 5 years since she passed away. Pancreatic cancer, fast and relentless. We had 51 years together. When she left, it was like I lost half of myself. The house we'd built together became unbearably quiet. That's when Pearl suggested that I move in with Woodrow. More specifically, she suggested that they move into my house and I would live in the guest house. "It'll be easier for you that way, Dad. You won't have to maintain a big house." It sounded reasonable. Plus they had Finch, my granddaughter, who was 8 at the time. Bright head, lively eyes, and cerebral palsy from birth. I agreed to sign the house over to Pearl on one condition. The guest house would be mine for the rest of my life and no one could evict me from it. My old friend Lawrence, a lawyer to the bone, drew up the agreement in a way that wouldn't hurt a mosquito. I've known him since high school, and he knows I'm not the kind of guy who relies on kinship in real estate matters. Now, looking at the hydrangea bushes blooming outside the window, Edith loved them so much. I wonder if I made a mistake. Maybe I should have sold the house, bought a small apartment and lived my own life. But then I wouldn't see Finch every day, and she's the only thing keeping me in this world. There's the sound of dishes clinking in the kitchen of the big house. Pearl's making breakfast, so it's 7 o'clock. I know their routine by heart. Woodrow gets up at 6:30, showers, comes down for breakfast at 7:15. He works for an insurance company, wears suits that always look a little tight like he's gained weight but won't admit it. He leaves at 8, comes back at 6, sometimes later. Pearl teaches high school English literature. Smart woman, but something in her broke after Finch was born. I don't think she ever accepted that her child wouldn't be normal. I often catch her eyes on her daughter, a mixture of love and pity and some strange resentment, as if Finch was born that way on purpose to make her life harder. I step out of the cabin and walk toward the main house. The backyard is manicured, it's my job. Gardening has always been a hobby of mine, but now it's become my main occupation. 3 steps up to the back porch, the door is usually unlocked. I knock, more for formality, and walk in. "Good morning," I say as I enter the kitchen. Pearl is standing at the stove, stirring something in a pot. She turns around. Her face, so much like Edith's, looks tired, even at the beginning of the day. "Good morning, Papa," she replies without much enthusiasm. "Breakfast is almost ready." "I could wake Finch," I suggest. "She's already awake." Woodrow helps her get dressed. That's rare. Usually it's Pearl or a visiting nurse who takes care of Finch. Woodrow tries to stay away from anything related to the girl's care. "I don't have a medical degree," he likes to say. Though it's not about education, it's about human involvement. I sit down at the table. The kitchen is large, bright. Edith and I renovated it the year before she died. New ivory cabinets, granite countertops, an island in the middle. It still looks like new, even though Pearl doesn't keep up much. Mug marks on the countertops, last night's dishes in the sink. "How'd you sleep?" I ask, keeping the conversation going. "Fine," Pearl said, not turning around. "How about you?" "The usual." I saw the roses starting to bloom. "That's good. The conversation's not going well. It's almost always like that. It's like a wall has grown between us since Edith died. Or maybe it was always there, but Edith was a bridge between us. She had a way of smoothing things over, finding common ground with everyone. I'm as straight as a rail and as flexible." Woodrow appears in the doorway, rolling the wheelchair in which Finch is sitting. The girl has blonde hair, braided in a sloppy braid. It's obvious that Woodrow braided it, unskillfully but diligently. She smiles when she sees me. "Grandpa Hearn?" she exclaims. Her voice is a little slurred, but there is no music more pleasant to me. "Good morning, sunshine," I reply, and the world around me immediately becomes brighter. Woodrow nods at me instead of greeting me and sets Finch's chair by the desk. He's tall, wiry, with thinning dark hair and a permanently disgruntled expression. Today he's wearing a navy blue suit that, like all his suits, is a little tight around the shoulders. "Pearl, I'm late. Can you get Finch to school in time?" he asks, glancing at his watch. "Sure," Pearl replies, setting a bowl of oatmeal on the table in front of Finch. "Eat up, sweetheart." "I can drive her," I offer. "I don't have anything to do today." "You never have anything to do," Woodrow mutters under his breath, but loud enough for me to hear. I ignore his remark. "Really, Pearl, you don't need to be late for work. I'll drop Finch off and pick her up after class." Pearl hesitates. She doesn't like me interfering with their routine, but practicality takes over. "Okay, thanks, Dad. Classes end at 2 in the afternoon. Don't forget her meds. They're in the pink bag on the coat rack." "I know where the meds are," I reply. I drive Finch to school at least twice a week when Pearl has extra classes. Woodrow grabs the toast, kisses Pearl hastily on the cheek, and leaves without saying goodbye to me or Finch. The front door slams, and a moment later the sound of the engine starting is heard. "Grandpa, will you help me with my science project?" Finch asks, working diligently with her spoon. Her movements are awkward, but she's trying hard to be independent. "Sure, sweetie. What's the project?" "We're studying the life cycle of plants. I need to grow beans and record the changes." "That's a great idea. I just got some green bean seeds. We can plant them after school today." Pearl sighed, pouring himself some coffee. "Just don't make a mess like last time with that ant house." "That was a science expedition, Mom," Finch objects earnestly, and I can't hold back a smile. Despite her limitations, or maybe because of them, Finch has developed an incredible powers of observation and curiosity. She loves science, especially biology. Her room is littered with books I buy for her, from children's encyclopedias to serious science books adapted for a young age. After breakfast, Pearl quickly packs up and leaves, leaving Finch and me alone. We're in no hurry. It's still over an hour before school starts, and school is only 15 minutes away. "Grandpa, tell me how you and Grandma met," Finch asks as I help her brush her teeth. It's a story she's heard dozens of times, but for some reason she never tires of asking me to repeat it. "Your grandmother Edith worked in the university library," I begin the familiar story. "I was in my 3rd year of engineering and was preparing for exams. Every day I came to the library and sat at the same desk, where I could see the circulation desk where she worked." "And you were afraid to talk to her," Finch says with a smile. "That's right. For a whole month I just watched her from afar. She was the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen. Long brown hair, always in a ponytail, and the kindest eyes in the world." "And then she approached you?" "Yes. One day she came over to my desk and put a book in front of me." "I think this is what you're looking for," she said. It was a book on material resistance, exactly what I needed for the exam. I was so surprised I couldn't get a word out. And she laughed. Yes, she laughed and said, "If you ever find the courage to ask me out for coffee, I'll say yes." And she left. Can you imagine what a blow that was to my young heart? Finch chuckles, imagining the scene. "And you asked her out the same day?" "No, not until the next day. It took me 24 hours to pull myself together, but it was the best decision of my life." I help Finch into her wheelchair and drive her to the garage where my old but reliable minivan, equipped with a chair elevator, is parked. Pearl and Woodrow drive brand new sedans, but none of them are equipped to carry Finch. That's my concern. On the way to school, Finch tells me about her science teacher, Miss Broom, who, she says, knows everything in the world about bugs and spiders. I listen, occasionally asking questions, enjoying her enthusiasm. Finch's school is one of the few in Greensboro fully adapted for children with special needs. I bring her to the main entrance where a school aide is already waiting for us to help with the chair. "Bye, Grandpa," Finch waves to me. "Don't forget the beans." "Never," I promise. "I'll see you at 2 o'clock. Back home, I do the usual things. Watering the garden, dusting my cabin, emailing an old colleague. Time crawls slowly when Finch isn't around. Around noon, I hear a car pull up. I look out the window. It's Pearl. Strange, she doesn't usually come home in the middle of the day. I walk out to the doorstep of the guest house. Pearl is walking across the backyard, taking off her sunglasses as she goes. Her face is tense. "Is everything okay?" I ask. "Yeah, I just forgot some important papers," she replies, but I sense that it's more than that. I follow her into the house. In the kitchen, she starts going through the stack of papers on the table, but her movements are absent-minded. "Pearl, what's going on?" She sighs and sinks into a chair. "It's nothing in particular, just—" Woodrow brought up the subject of a specialized school for Finch again. I tense up. This isn't the first time this topic has come up. Woodrow thinks Finch should be sent to a boarding school for children with disabilities in another state, a place where she'll live away from her family, surrounded by strangers. "And what did you say to him?" I ask, trying to keep my voice calm. "The same thing I've always said. That Finch is happy here, at her school, with us." She looks out the window, avoiding my gaze. But he keeps insisting, says we can't give her professional care, that she'd be better off with kids like her. "Finch isn't like her. She's unique, like every child," I say firmly. "And she gets everything she needs here. She has great doctors, a good school, a loving family." "I know, Daddy," Pearl interrupts, "but Woodrow, he's worried about the future, about what will happen when we're gone." "I'm more worried about her present," I reply. "And as far as I know, this specialized school is more like an institution than a home. Is that really what you want for your daughter?" Pearl is silent. I can see the different feelings struggling in her eyes. "No," she finally says. "I don't. But Woodrow's not a monster either, Daddy. He cares for her in his own way." I hold back the urge to object. Woodrow never wanted a special needs child. When Finch's diagnosis became apparent, he became distant, immersed in his work, spending more time away from home. It wasn't that he didn't love her. Rather, he didn't know how to love her for who she was. "I hope you won't let him make this decision alone," I say. "Of course not." She finds the right papers and stands up. "I should get back. You'll take Finch." As agreed. Pearl nods and walks away, leaving me alone with my troubled thoughts. I think back to when I gave up this house 5 years ago, hoping I was doing the right thing, that I was providing a future for Pearl and her family, that I'd be there for my granddaughter, watching her grow up. What I didn't realize was that I would witness the slow destruction of my daughter's family, that I would watch Woodrow drift away from Pearl and Finch, that Pearl would be torn between her daughter and her husband, that my granddaughter, feeling the strain, would spend more and more time with me in the guest house. I didn't think that one day might come when I'd have to step in to protect Finch, even from her own parents. It's been a rainy spring in Greensboro. For the second month, it's rained almost every day. The garden around the guest house is a little swamp. My joints ache from the damp, but what bothers me most is that Finch can't spend time outside. She likes to sit in the garden watching the birds and insects. When the weather is nice, I often take her chair out onto the lawn and we read together or just talk, enjoying the sunshine. But not now. It's Saturday, and the whole house is in some unusual bustle. I had heard Pearl and Woodrow talking excitedly in the kitchen since this morning. Only fragments of phrase reached my cabin, but the intonation was excited, not like their usual dull squabbles. Toward noon, When the rain stopped briefly, I decided to walk to the main house. Finch was due back from her morning speech therapy session. Miss Porter, a very savvy professional who'd been working with her for 3 years, came in on Saturdays. The house was in chaos. 2 large suitcases were in the hallway, clothes were strewn on the living room couch, and Pearl was scurrying between the bedroom and the bathroom, picking up cosmetics and vials. "What's going on?" I asked, stopping in the doorway to the living room. Pearl turned around, her eyes glistening like she had a fever. "Daddy, it's so good of you to come. We have terrific news." Woodrow came out of the study holding some papers. He seemed agitated, but in a good way, the way I hadn't seen him in a long time. "Hearn," he nodded, which for him was already a sign of unusual friendliness. "We've won the cruise," Pearl blurted out before I could even say hello. "A 2-week cruise in the Caribbean, all inclusive. Can you believe it? I had no idea. I mean, I understood the concept of a cruise, but I couldn't figure out where it came from." "Did you win it? The lottery?" "No, a contest from Woodrow's insurance company." Pearl was picking up a bunch of stuff. "They were holding a motivational contest for employees, and Woodrow won. His performance was the best in the department for the last quarter." Woodrow straightened up slightly, clearly pleased with himself. 200% of the plan, he said with undisguised pride. The nearest competitor had done only 175. "Congratulations," I said, not knowing what else to say. "And when are you leaving?" "Tomorrow." Pearl was practically glowing with excitement. "The plane leaves at 14:30. The cruise starts in Miami, and they'll meet us there and take us to the ship." I blinked, trying to comprehend the information. "Tomorrow? That soon? How about—" The doorbell rang at that moment, and Pearl rushed to open it. Miss Porter stood on the doorstep with Finch. The classes were usually held at the special center, and the girl was driven back and forth. "Hello, Grandpa," Finch exclaimed when she saw me. Her face lit up with joy, as it always did when she saw me. "Hello, Mr. Atkins," Miss Porter said as she wheeled the wheelchair into the hallway. "Finch did a very good job today. We learned a new exercise for articulation. I can say structured almost without stuttering," Finch boasted. "That's wonderful, Sunshine." I leaned over to kiss her forehead. "I'm proud of you." Pearl paid Miss Porter and said a quick goodbye, clearly in a hurry to get back to packing. Finch looked around curiously at the suitcases and scattered belongings. "Are we going somewhere?" she asked, excitement in her voice. Pearl and Woodrow exchanged quick glances that I couldn't decipher. "Mommy and Daddy are going on a cruise, honey," Pearl said, taking a seat next to Finch's chair. "It's for Daddy's job. It's very important to his career." Finch's face froze for a moment, then she asked, "What about me? Am I going too?" Again that strange exchange of glances between the parents. "No, darling," Woodrow replied, stepping closer. "This is for adults only. It's a business cruise. There'll be conferences, meetings. Very boring for a child." I noticed Finch's lips twitch, but she pulled herself together. "I see," she said quietly. "Who am I going to stay with?" "Grandfather, of course." Pearl glanced at me briefly. "He'll look after you while we're gone." I felt a wave of resentment rising inside me. They hadn't even bothered to discuss it with me beforehand. It was as if I were not a person with my own plans and decisions, but a piece of furniture that was always at hand. "Pearl, can we talk privately?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Dad, I'm really busy right now. Maybe later?" "No, now," I insisted. "It's important." Pearl sighed and stood up. "Woodrow, keep an eye on Finch. Daddy and I are going out for a while." We went out onto the back porch. It was starting to rain again, but it was dry under the awning. "Pearl, you can't just leave without talking to me about this," I began. "Finch needs special care. She's on a regimen of medication, physical therapy, exercise." "Dad, you're doing a great job with her," Pearl interrupted me. "You know her regimen as well as I do. And besides, it's only for 2 weeks." 2 weeks is a long time. What if something happens? She can have seizures, you know. She'll be fine. You've got all our contacts, doctors' numbers. If anything happens, call the emergency services. Pearl, this is not a joke. You're a mother. You can't just take off for 2 weeks and leave a special needs child in the care of a 78-year-old man. Pearl's face turned rigid. Dad, don't be so dramatic. You're perfectly fine for your age, and you spend time with Finch all the time. What's going to change? What's going to change is that I'm going to be solely responsible for her 24 hours a day. What if I get sick? What if I can't pick her up or help her to the bathroom? For God's sake, Dad, you're making a big deal out of this. This is our first vacation in 5 years. 5 years, Dad. We haven't been away since Mom died. Woodrow's working his ass off. I'm torn between school and home. We need this vacation. What about Finch? Doesn't she need a break from feeling like a burden to her parents? Pearl turned pale. It's not fair. We love Finch, but we're people too, Dad. We have our own needs, our own desires. We can't live for her all the time. No one's talking about all the time. We're talking about a specific situation. You won that cruise, great. Why not postpone the trip? Make some plans. Find a professional caregiver to help me with Finch. Because the voucher is only valid for these dates. Pearl was practically screaming. We can't reschedule. And a professional caregiver costs money we don't have. You've got money for a new car for Woodrow, for a kitchen remodel for those stupid golf courses, but no money for a nurse for your daughter? Pearl took a deep breath, obviously trying to calm down. Dad, listen. This is a done deal. We're leaving tomorrow. You're staying with Finch. If you need help, call your neighbor, Mrs. Oliver. She's looked after Finch a couple of times already. I'll leave money for expenses and any necessary instructions. It'll be fine. She turned to leave, but I grabbed her arm. Pearl, think of your daughter. She needs you. And I need this vacation, Daddy, Pearl said quietly. I'm on edge. If I don't rest, I'll just break down. And then no one will be better off, not me, not Finch. She released my hand and went back inside, leaving me standing in the growing rain. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of packing. Pearl was making lists and instructions for me. Woodrow was on the phone confirming reservations and organizing things. Finch sat quietly in her room, pretending to read a book, but I could see she was just staring at one point. Toward evening, I went in to see her. Her room was decorated in light green tones, a color she had chosen herself. There were posters of animals and plants on the walls, shelves filled with books and collections of rocks, shells, feathers, anything you could collect without getting out of your wheelchair. Hey, Sunshine, I said, sitting down on the edge of her bed. How are you? Finch shrugged, not lifting her eyes from the book. I'm fine. Are you upset about your parents leaving? She hesitated, then answered quietly. No, I mean, not much. It's just, they could have taken me with them. Your parents say it's a business trip. I saw the brochure, Grandpa. Finch looked up at me. It says family cruise, with activities for the kids and everything. I felt something tighten in my chest. Of course Finch isn't stupid. She knows exactly when she's being lied to. They just want to spend time together, Sunshine. Adults need that sometimes. I know. She lowered her gaze again. It's just, we haven't been away together in a while. Not since I stopped walking. Until she was 6, Finch was able to walk with the help of special orthotics. But then her condition worsened, and she was in a chair. It was a difficult time for the whole family. Woodrow became even more withdrawn. Pearl became depressed. I had just moved into the guest house at that time and took over most of the care of my granddaughter. You and I can have our own adventure, I suggested. What do you say we go to the botanical gardens next weekend? The orchids are supposed to bloom there. Finch smiled weakly. Sounds great, Grandpa. Thank you. There was a knock at the door and Pearl came in with a tray. I brought dinner, she said, setting the tray on the bedside table. Chicken broth and croutons. Your favorite. Finch nodded but didn't say anything. Pearl touched her hair in an awkward gesture of affection. "Honey, I know you're upset, but Daddy and I will be back soon, and we'll bring you some presents from the Caribbean. What would you like?" "Nothing, Mom. Thank you." Pearl looked helplessly at me, then back at her daughter. "Finch, please don't take offense. This cruise is very important to Daddy's job. If he does well, he could get a promotion. That means more money for our family. We can pay for that new physical therapy Dr. Reed was talking about." "I'm not offended, Mom." Finch's voice was steady, emotionless. "It's okay. Grandpa and I can handle it." "Of course we will," I confirmed, though I was seething with anger at Pearl and Woodrow. How could they be so blind to their own child's feelings? Pearl gave Finch another awkward pat on the head and left the room. I stayed with my granddaughter, helping her with dinner and trying to distract her by talking about the book she was reading, something about the sea creatures of the deep. Later that evening, when Finch had already gone to bed, I went down to the kitchen for a glass of water and heard Pearl and Woodrow talking in the living room. "I don't think it's a good idea," Pearl was saying. "He's very upset." "Pearl, we can't cancel the trip because your father isn't happy." Woodrow's voice sounded annoyed. "I worked my ass off to win this cruise. This is my chance to impress the management. Jefferson will be there with his wife, and so will Brickman. If I don't show up, it's going to look like a slap in the face." I know. It's just, Finch is upset too. Finch is always upset when it comes to leaving her for even a minute. It's an unhealthy attachment, Pearl. Dr. Morgan talked about it. Dr. Morgan also said she needs stability and a sense of security, which your father is perfectly capable of providing for 2 weeks. God, Pearl, we're not leaving her forever. We're just taking a little vacation. All parents do it. Not all parents have special needs children. And that's why we need this vacation even more. Woodrow raised his voice. "Do you have any idea what it's like to come home every day and see this? The constant reminders that our daughter will never be normal, never get married, never give us grandchildren, never live on her own." "Don't say that." Pearl sounded angry now too. "Finch is smart. She's learning. She can do a lot." "In what world, Pearl? In a world where stairs have been replaced by ramps and all doors are wide enough for a wheelchair? She'll always depend on us. She'll always need our help. And I just want 2 weeks, just 2 weeks, when I can pretend to live a normal life. Is that too much to ask?" There was silence. I stood in the darkness of the hallway, feeling the blood pounding in my temples. Woodrow's words were like a slap in the face. "No," Pearl said quietly at last. "It's not too much. You're right. We need this vacation." "Then stop doubting. Your father can handle it. He loves Finch. Too much, if you ask me. And at the end of the day, he's your father. He's supposed to be helping us. Isn't that what families are for?" I went quietly back to my cabin, forgetting my glass of water. A storm of emotions raged inside me. Anger, frustration, pity for Finch, and even a strange compassion for Woodrow. He was right about one thing. Life with a special needs child isn't easy, but he'd chosen the most selfish way to deal with that difficulty: escape. All night I tossed and turned without sleep, thinking about the 2 weeks ahead. Would I be able to physically handle taking care of Finch? Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. I have experience, and although my knees aren't what they used to be, I have plenty of strength. But can Finch emotionally handle this outright rejection from her parents? She's a smart girl. She gets it. She understands that her father sees her as a burden, that her mother is torn between loving her and trying to save her marriage to a man who seems to have been estranged from the family for years. By morning, I had made my decision. These 2 weeks, I'm not just going to look after Finch. I'm going to plan for our future. Because now, more clearly than ever, I realized that I could no longer rely on Pearl and Woodrow for my granddaughter's well-being. I must do something drastic, Something that would protect Finch and give her a chance at a happy life, even if her own parents were unable or unwilling to provide it. And I had a hunch that the answer might lie in the very contract Lawrence had drawn up 5 years ago when I'd handed the house over to Pearl. A contract I had never reread since then, but which I kept in a safe in my cabin in case I ever needed it. I guess that day had come. The morning was clear. It had stopped raining for the first time in weeks, and the sun was peeking through the guest house windows, leaving golden squares of light on the floor. I woke up early, as usual, but today there was a sense of uneasiness attached to my awakening. Pearl and Woodrow would be leaving at noon, and from now on, taking care of Finch would fall entirely on my shoulders. I got out of bed slowly, feeling my joints protest. After a quick breakfast, I headed toward the main house. A cab was already parked in the driveway, the driver loading suitcases into the trunk. Woodrow, wearing light-colored pants and a Hawaiian shirt, so much for the business cruise, was supervising the process, occasionally glancing at his watch. "Ah, there you are," he said when he saw me. "Good. We were just getting ready." "Where's Finch?" I asked, wasting no time with greetings. "Inside with Pearl. She's putting together the latest instructions for you." I walked into the house and found Pearl in the kitchen. She looked completely different without her usual strict teacher's outfit, in a light floral print dress, her hair in a casual bun. Finch sat in the wheelchair beside her, silent and pale. "Good morning, Dad." Pearl handed me a thick folder. "Everything you need to know is in here. Medication schedules, doctor's contacts, the address of the pharmacy where we have a loan, insurance policy number, oh, and a list of foods Finch can't eat." I took the folder, feeling its weight, physical and metaphorical. "And the money?" I asked directly. "You said you were keeping money for expenses." Pearl looked a little embarrassed. "Yes, of course." She took an envelope out of her purse. "Here's $300. That should be enough. Insurance covers most of the meds, and there's food in the fridge. I've got it all figured out." I looked in the envelope. 10 $20 bills and 2 $50 bills. $300 for 2 weeks. Even assuming there was enough food in the fridge, which I doubted, that was barely enough to cover the medications my insurance wouldn't cover, and the transportation costs the gas for my car to take Finch to school and treatments. "It's not enough, Pearl," I said. "Do you know how much Finch's special moisturizer costs? And her nutritional supplements? And gasoline?" "Dad, that's all we can spare right now." Pearl looked annoyed. "We've already spent enough on this cruise. Souvenirs, excursions, tips. It all costs money, which you'd rather spend on a vacation than on your daughter's needs." "Don't start." Pearl lowered her voice, glaring at Finch. "We've already discussed this. The decision's been made." Woodrow's voice came from the hallway. "Pearl, we have to go. The cab's waiting." Pearl nodded, kissed the top of Finch's head, and whispered something in her ear. Then she straightened up and headed for the exit. "Daddy, don't forget, Finch has a consultation with Dr. Reed on Wednesday. Don't be late, he's hard to catch. All the paperwork's in the folder." "Same as always," I muttered, but Pearl was already coming out of the kitchen. Finch and I went out to see them off. The cabbie honked impatiently. Woodrow was already in the car, staring at his phone. Pearl gave Finch another hug, then gave me a quick hug. "Thanks, Dad. You don't know how important this is to us." "Try to remember that you have a daughter at least once in a while," I said quietly in her ear. "Call her every day." Pearl nodded, but I could see that her mind was already on the airplane, flying over the ocean to a place without wheelchairs and daily medication. "We'll be back in 2 weeks. 13 days to be exact," she said as she got into the cab. "Take care." The car started and soon disappeared around the corner. Finch and I were alone in the driveway, standing in the unusually bright sunlight. "So, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice upbeat, "what are we doing today?" Finch shrugged. "I don't know, Grandpa. What do you suggest? How about a picnic in the garden? The weather's finally cooperating." Finch's face brightened a little. "With peanut butter sandwiches?" With a double helping of peanut butter, I confirmed, and maybe some ice cream for dessert. And so began our 2 weeks together. The first few days went relatively smoothly. We had a set routine. I helped Finch with her morning routine, drove her to school, picked her up after school, we did homework, and in the evenings we read or watched the nature documentaries she loved so much. Pearl called every night for the first 3 days, but the conversations were short and perfunctory. "How are you doing? Everything good?" "Great. We're doing great too. The weather is wonderful. The beaches are amazing." No real questions about Finch's well-being, about her progress at school, about whether I was coping. On the 4th day, the trouble started. Finch woke up in the morning with a high fever and complaints of a sore throat. I called the school to alert them to her absence and consulted the list of doctors in the folder Pearl had left behind. The district pediatrician, Dr. Holland, could only see us in 2 days. I tried to call Pearl, but she wasn't answering. Apparently she was on some kind of field trip. Deciding not to take any chances, I took Finch to the nearest emergency room. The wait was long, Finch got worse, and by the time the doctor finally saw us, she was running a high fever and having trouble breathing. The diagnosis, strep infection, required immediate antibiotic treatment. I drove to the pharmacy listed by Pearl, only to find out that our credit there had been maxed out a month ago and no one had refilled it. I had to pay out of my own pocket, $98 for antibiotics, $35 for antipyretics, and another $15 for a special throat spray. Nearly half of the money Pearl had left behind disappeared in one day. Finch spent the next 3 days in bed. I slept on the cot next to her, waking up every few hours to check her temperature and give her medication. Fortunately, the antibiotics worked quickly, and by the end of the week, Finch was feeling better. But our problems were just beginning. It turned out that the food supply in the fridge wasn't as plentiful as Pearl had claimed. By the end of the first week, we'd eaten almost everything we could cook without much culinary skill. I had to drive to the supermarket and spend even more money from my limited budget. To make matters worse, Wednesday's consultation with Dr. Reed revealed that Finch needed a new course of physical therapy, 10 sessions at $50 each, not covered by insurance. When I tried to explain the situation, Dr. Reed only shrugged and said that the treatment could be postponed until my parents returned, but that it would negatively affect Finch's progress. I decided to pay for the first 2 sessions out of my remaining funds and the rest would have to be postponed. By the end of the first week, there was less than $30 left of the $300, and there was still a whole week to go. All my attempts to contact Pearl were unsuccessful. She stopped answering the phone after the 5th day, sending only a short message. "It's okay. We have a lot of excursions. Connection is bad. Don't worry." On Sunday, when it had been exactly a week since their departure, I finally made up my mind. I took out of the safe the file folder I had kept all these years and called Lawrence Peter, my old friend and lawyer. "Lawrence, it's Hearn. I need your help. How soon can you get here?" Lawrence showed up an hour later. Despite Sunday, he was in a suit I'd never seen him dressed otherwise. Tall, thin, with a neatly trimmed gray beard, he looked like a typical lawyer from a TV show, only much kinder. We settled into the guest house. Finch was resting in her room in the main house. I'd left the door ajar so I could hear if she called. "Now, Hearn," Lawrence scrutinized the contract I had shown him. "You want to know if this repossession clause is still valid?" "Yes," I nodded. "When we were making this contract, you put in a clause that I could repossess the house if certain conditions were not met. I want to know if that clause can be enforced now." Lawrence turned the page, ran his finger over the text, and adjusted his glasses on his nose. "Yes, here it is. Clause 8. The donor shall have the right to rescind the gift and regain possession of the real property if the donee treats the donor or members of the donor's family in a manner that is unacceptable in terms of common sense and morality, or if the donee fails to fulfill the obligation imposed upon him to provide for the maintenance of the donor. He looked up from the document. Hearn, that's pretty vague wording. What exactly happened? I told him everything. About the cruise, about how Pearl and Woodrow had left Finch in my care without sufficient funds or instructions, about Finch's illness, about their not answering the phone, about how I'd overheard a conversation in which Woodrow had called his daughter a burden. Lawrence listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in a small notebook. "What do you want to do?" he asked when I was done. "I want to reclaim the house, sell it, buy a new place adapted to Finch, and take custody of her." Lawrence whistled. "That's a big decision, my friend, and legally tricky. Custody is a separate matter, requiring proof of parental unfitness. But as for the house," he looked at the document again. "Yes, theoretically you could enforce that clause. Pearl and Woodrow have failed to fulfill the obligation to support you, leaving you without sufficient funds. But that would have to be proven in court if they decided to contest it." "I don't want to go to court, Lawrence. I just want a future for Finch. She deserves better than parents who only see her as a burden." Lawrence rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "There's one other thing that might play in your favor. There is a clause in the contract that the main house must remain Pearl's primary residence. If she left it for an extended period of time without a good reason, it could be considered a breach of the terms." 2 weeks is an extended period of time. In the context of caring for a child with special needs, quite possibly, especially given that they have not provided adequate support and are not returning calls. I think we have a chance. I nodded, feeling the resolve grow stronger in me. What needs to be done? First, I need to prepare the deeds of gift revocation. Then we'll file them at the registry office. Given our relationship with Judge Harrison, who handles these cases, I think we can expedite the process, but you have to be prepared for Pearl and Woodrow to be very unhappy. "I'm ready," I said firmly. "How long will it take?" "If everything goes smoothly, a few days, a week at the most. But there's one more question. If you take the house back and sell it, where will you and Finch move? I've already thought about it." I saw an ad for a 1-story house on Maple Street. It's fully handicapped. The previous owner was in a chair, wide doorways, ramps, specially equipped bathroom, everything Finch needs. And the money? How much is this house worth? $420,000. This house, I waved my hand around, referring to the main house, is worth about $600,000 in its present condition. The difference would allow us to live comfortably and pay for all of Finch's medical expenses for a long time. Lawrence nodded, closing the file folder. "Good. I'll start preparing the paperwork tomorrow morning. But, Hearn, you need to be sure. It will ruin your relationship with your daughter." "That relationship is already ruined, Lawrence," I said quietly. "Pearl chose Woodrow over Finch. I can't let my granddaughter grow up in a house where she's considered a burden." "I understand." Lawrence put his hand on my shoulder. "I'll do everything in my power to help you." After Lawrence left, I went to check on Finch. She was asleep, curled up under the covers, her blonde hair strewn across the pillow. I sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to wake her. "I'll do anything to protect you, Sunshine," I whispered, looking at her peaceful face. "I promise." The next few days passed in feverish activity. Lawrence acted with amazing speed and efficiency. By Wednesday, the papers were ready and filed. By Friday, Judge Harrison reviewed the case and ruled in my favor. Pearl and Woodrow had violated the terms of the deed of gift by failing to provide me with proper maintenance and leaving the house for extended periods of time without good cause. The title to the house was returned to me that same day. I immediately contacted a realtor and put the house on the market. Given the prestigious neighborhood and the good condition of the property, he expected a quick sale. At the same time, I put in an application to purchase the house on Maple Street. The owner agreed to a quick deal if I put down a 15% deposit, almost all of my savings. But it was worth it. All this time, Finch knew nothing of my plans. I was afraid of upsetting her or giving her false hope if something went wrong. We continued our usual routine: school, homework, book, and movie nights. Pearl still didn't answer most phone calls, limiting herself to the occasional short message. On Monday, when Pearl and Woodrow were only 2 days away from returning, a miracle happened. A buyer was found for the house, willing to pay full price if the deal went through quickly. By Tuesday evening, all the papers were signed, the money was deposited in my account, and the keys to the house on Maple Street were in my pocket. I decided to move Finch's essentials to the new house discreetly while she was at school. The bed, clothes, books, her collections, and her favorite toys. The movers I hired worked quickly and carefully, and by the time I picked Finch up from school, her new room was almost ready. "Grandpa, where are we going?" she asked when I turned not toward the house but in the opposite direction. "I have a surprise for you, sunshine," I answered, trying to keep my voice lighthearted. "Close your eyes." Finch obeyed, though I could see she was nervous. When we pulled up to the new house, a beautiful one-story building with a wide driveway and manicured garden, I helped her out of the car and wheeled her chair to the front door. "You can open your eyes now." Finch blinked, looking at the house in front of her. "Where are we?" "This is our new home," I said, watching her reaction. "Yours and mine." "And Mom and Dad?" Her voice trembled. "They're staying at the old house for now. Finch, listen, there's something I need to explain to you." I told her the truth as gently but honestly as possible. About how I saw how Woodrow treated her, about how they left us destitute, about how I was determined to give her a better life. "But that doesn't mean you won't see Mom and Dad anymore," I added hastily, seeing the tears in her eyes. "You'll see them whenever you want. It's just that you'll be living with me, in a house that's completely customized for your needs." Finch was silent for a long moment, looking at the house. Then she looked up at me. "They're going to be very angry," she said quietly. Yes, I didn't lie. They would be. But sometimes you have to do what's right, even if it makes you angry. "Can I see the inside of the house?" "Sure, sweetheart. It's your house now." We went inside, and I showed her the spacious rooms, the specially equipped bathroom, the wide hallways that were easy to drive a chair through. Gradually, her face brightened, especially when she saw her new room with her favorite things already arranged in their places. "Do you like it?" I asked when we finished the tour. "Yes," she answered, and for the first time in a long time I saw a real smile on her face. "I love it, Grandpa." At that moment, my phone rang. Pearl's name popped up on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered it. "Daddy!" Pearl's voice sounded panicked. "What's going on? Some man just called us and said he bought our house. Is there some kind of mistake?" "No, Pearl, there's no mistake," I said calmly. "I reclaimed the house according to the clause in the deed of gift and sold it." There was a deafening silence, then an explosion. "You what? You had no right. This is our house. Where are we going to live? Where's Finch?" "Finch is with me. We've moved into a new house that's completely customized for her needs, and you and Woodrow can find a new place with the money you spend on cruises and entertainment." "Daddy, you're crazy. We're going back right now. I'm going to sue you. You can't just take our daughter away." "I can, and I did, Pearl. You abandoned Finch without adequate resources or care. You didn't answer the phone when she got sick. You violated the terms of the contract, and I will no longer allow my granddaughter to live in a home where she's considered a burden. We're leaving tonight." Pearl's voice shook with rage. "And when we get back, you're going to regret your decision." She hung up. I turned to Finch, who'd heard everything. "They're coming back," she said quietly. "Yeah," I nodded, "but don't worry. It's all legal. There's nothing they can do." Finch looked at me with her serious eyes. "Are you sure you did the right thing, Grandpa?" I knelt down in front of her chair, took her small hands in mine. I'm absolutely sure, sweetheart. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions to protect the ones you love, and I love you more than anything. Finch leaned forward and put her arms around my neck. I love you too, Grandpa. We stayed like that, hugging as the last rays of sunlight streamed through the windows of our new home. I knew there was a storm ahead of us when Pearl and Woodrow returned. But in that moment, with Finch in my arms, I was pretty sure I'd made the right decision. The next morning was as clear as the previous morning, but there was tension in the air. I knew Pearl and Woodrow were arriving tonight. They'd booked the next flight out of Miami right after we talked. I had about 10 hours to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. The first thing I did was call Lawrence and brief him on the situation. They're coming back today and will probably try to challenge the deal, I said. We need to be ready. Don't worry, Hearn, Lawrence replied in his usual calm tone. All the paperwork is in order. The deal is legitimate. I'll be at your place by 5 o'clock this evening. If they want to talk, it is better to do it in the presence of a lawyer. Then I took care of Finch. After yesterday's upheaval, she looked a little confused, though she tried not to show it. Grandpa, is my school far from here? She asked at breakfast. About 20 minutes away, I answered. A little farther than the old house, but not much farther. I'll drive you every day like I used to. What if Mom and Dad want me to move back in with them? I set aside the toast I was holding in my hand and looked at my granddaughter carefully. Finch, listen to me. No one can make you do anything you don't want to do. If you want to live with your parents, that's your right. But I think you're better off here. This house was built with your needs in mind. You can be more independent here. I want to stay with you, she said quietly. It's just, I don't want my mom to think I don't love her. Your mom knows you love her, sweetheart, and you'll always be able to see her and Daddy. It's just that you'll live apart. Finch nodded, but I could see something was still bothering her. Grandpa, did you really sell their house? Technically, it was my house that I once gave to your mom, but yeah, I sold it. Where are they going to live? That's a question I've been asking myself since I sold the house. Sure, Pearl and Woodrow didn't have a place to live now, but they had a substantial amount of money from the sale of the house their share, which I had transferred to Pearl's account last night. More than enough to buy a new apartment or even a small house. They have money, Finch. They can rent an apartment or buy a new house. Don't worry about it. After breakfast, we spent the day setting up the new house. I unpacked boxes and Finch supervised, pointing out where her books and collection should stand. We took a break for lunch, and then I showed her the garden behind the house. Not as big as the old house, but spacious enough with comfortable paths for her chair and pretty flower beds. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we had finished the basic chores of settling in. I made an early dinner, pasta and cheese, which Finch was particularly fond of, and we ate in the new kitchen, looking out at the setting sun through the large window. At 5 o'clock, just as promised, Lawrence arrived. He was in his unchanged suit with a leather briefcase in his hands. "Good evening, Hearn," he said as he entered the house. "Good evening, young lady," he nodded to Finch. "Hello, Mr. Peter," Finch replied politely. "Lovely house." Lawrence looked around the spacious living room. "Excellent choice." "Thank you." I was glad for his approval. "Coffee? I'd love some." Lawrence and I sat down at the kitchen table while Finch went to her room to continue arranging the books on the new shelves. "So," Lawrence sipped his coffee, "what's our plan in case they arrive?" "I think they'll go to the old house first," I said. "They'll find that the new owners are already living there, and they'll probably call me. I'll give them that address and they'll come here. I imagine the conversation will be tense." "That's putting it mildly," Lawrence grinned. "You've robbed them of their home and effectively taken their daughter. They'll be furious." "I didn't take Finch," I countered. "I just gave her a better life. She can still see her parents whenever she wants." "I know, Hearn." Lawrence put his hand on my shoulder. "I'm on your side, remember? But from a legal point of view, the situation is complicated. Even though we acted within the law, they may try to challenge your actions or even file for custody of Finch." "They won't get custody," I said firmly. "Not after abandoning her sick, without adequate resources or care." "That's a strong argument, but not enough to terminate parental rights. At best, the court could appoint you as temporary guardian, but to do that, we'd have to prove that Pearl and Woodrow are unfit as parents, and that's not easy." I sighed, realizing that Lawrence was right. Despite my best efforts, the law is still on the side of the biological parents, unless they are blatantly neglectful or abusive. And in Pearl and Woodrow's case, it was more about emotional neglect, which is hard to prove in court. "What do you suggest?" "Stick to the facts," Lawrence said. "You got the house back legally. You bought a new place better suited to Finch's needs. You acted in her best interests. If they start threatening to sue, remind them that a public trial isn't in their best interest, especially if details of how they abandoned a sick child come out." I nodded, feeling somewhat relieved at Lawrence's reassurance. At that moment, my cell phone rang. Pearl's name popped up on the screen. "They've landed," I said to Lawrence before answering it. "Hello? Daddy?" Pearl's voice sounded both angry and confused. "We came home and there are strangers there. They say they've bought our house. What's going on?" "I explained it to you yesterday, Pearl," I said calmly. "I took the house back and sold it. You and Woodrow violated the terms of the deed of gift." "This is crazy. Where are you? Where's Finch?" "We're in our new house, 234 Maple Street. If you want to talk, come here. And Pearl, I have my lawyer with me." There was a short pause. "We'll be there in 20 minutes, she said at last, and hung up. I turned to Lawrence. "They're on their way." He nodded and opened his briefcase, pulling out some papers. "Good. I'll be ready." I went over to Finch to warn her. "Sunshine, your parents will be here soon. They're very upset and can be very loud. If you get uncomfortable or scared, you can go to your room and close the door, okay?" Finch nodded, her face turning serious. "I'll stay with you, Grandpa. I'm not scared." I smiled, once again marveling at her fortitude. "Good. But remember, no matter what happens, I love you, and everything I do is for your good." 20 minutes later, just as Pearl had promised, a cab pulled up in front of the house. My daughter and son-in-law got out of it, both with tanned faces and in summer clothes that contrasted strangely with their fierce expressions. Woodrow was carrying 2 large suitcases, which he set abruptly on the sidewalk while paying the cab driver. I opened the door before they could even ring the bell. Pearl burst into the house like a hurricane, Woodrow following her, leaving the suitcases outside. "What have you done?" Pearl screamed when she saw me. "You sold our house behind our backs. You kidnapped our daughter." "Calm down, Pearl," I said firmly. "Finch is here. Nothing happened to you, and I didn't do anything behind your back. I tried to contact you several times when Finch was sick, but you wouldn't answer your phone." "We had a bad reception. We were at sea. We took the time to call when we found out about the house," I remarked. "Strange that you couldn't find the time when your daughter was sick with a fever of 40. Lawrence got up from his seat at the kitchen table and came over to us. "Good evening, Mrs. Kane, Mr. Kane. I'm Lawrence Peter, Mr. Atkins' attorney. Perhaps we should all sit down and discuss the situation calmly." Woodrow, who had been silent until then, stepped forward. "We don't need a calm discussion. We want our daughter and our home." He looked around. "Finch, where are you?" "I'm here, Dad," Finch replied quietly, wheeling out of her room in her wheelchair. Pearl rushed over to her, kneeling down next to the chair. "Honey, are you okay? Grandpa didn't hurt you?" Finch looked surprised. "Of course not. Grandpa never hurts me." "We're taking you home," Pearl said, straightening up. "Pack your things." "But we don't have a home anymore, Mom," Finch replied calmly. "Grandfather said it's been sold." "It was a mistake, dear. We'll make it right. Won't we, Woodrow?" Woodrow nodded, his face red with anger. "Yes, We'll sue and get our house back, and your grandfather will answer for what he did." Lawrence cleared his throat. "I'm afraid it's not that simple, Mr. Kane. The house was legally returned to Mr. Atkins under Clause 8 of the deed of gift that you and your wife signed 5 years ago. The sale of the house to the new owners was also conducted in a proper manner. The deed was recorded, the money was transferred. It's virtually impossible to reverse that process." "What's paragraph 8? Pearl turned to Lawrence. "What are you talking about?" Lawrence took a copy of the contract out of his briefcase and handed it to Pearl. "It clearly states that the donor, that is Mr. Atkins, has the right to revoke the gift if the giver, that is you, fails to fulfill the obligation to provide for the donor's maintenance or treats him or his family members in an unacceptable manner." Pearl ran her eyes over the document, then handed it to Woodrow. "But we've always taken care of Daddy. He has a guest house, food, everything he needs. You left him without adequate funds for 2 weeks, with a child requiring special care," Lawrence replied calmly. "When Finch got sick, he had to pay for the medication out of his own pocket. You haven't been answering your cell phone. That could be construed as a failure to fulfill a maintenance obligation." "That's ridiculous," Woodrow exclaimed. "We left money. $300 for 2 weeks? I shook my head. It was barely enough for a week, given Finch's illness and her regular medical expenses. "If you sue," Lawrence continued, "all of these details will become public, including the fact that you went on a cruise, leaving a sick child in the care of an elderly man without sufficient funds. I'm not sure that's good for your reputation, Mr. Kane, especially considering your job at the insurance company." Woodrow turned pale. His position in the company depended largely on his reputation as a reliable family man. "This is blackmail," he hissed. "No, it's a statement of fact," Lawrence replied. "We are merely warning you of the possible consequences of a lawsuit." Pearl sank down on the sofa, looking suddenly very tired. "Dad, why did you do that? We're family. You could have just talked to us." "I tried, Pearl," I said, sitting down next to her. "I told you that 2 weeks was too long, that Finch needed professional care, that there wasn't enough money, but you wouldn't listen. You and Woodrow were only thinking of yourselves." "That's not true," she raised her voice. We're people too, Daddy. We need a vacation too." "I understand that, but you can't rest at the expense of your daughter's well-being." Finch, who'd been silent the whole time, moved closer. "Mom, don't be mad at Grandpa. I like it here. Look at the house. I can drive myself into the bathroom. The doors are wide, there are no steps, and we're not far from my school." Pearl looked at her daughter, and I saw something flicker in her eyes, maybe a realization. "Do you want to stay here? With Grandpa?" Finch nodded. "Yes, but I'll still see you, won't I? You'll come to visit?" Pearl cast a quick glance at Woodrow, who was standing by the window, his back to us. "Of course, honey. We'll be coming over, but where will we live?" "Our house is sold." I cleared my throat. "Pearl, I've deposited your share of the house sale into your account. It's a substantial sum, enough to buy a new apartment or even a small house. You won't be left on the street." Pearl looked surprised. "Did you wired the money?" "Of course I did. I wasn't going to leave you destitute. I only wanted to provide Finch with better living conditions." Woodrow turned abruptly. "And you think money will fix everything? You've ruined our family." "No, Woodrow," I stood up, looking him straight in the eye. "I didn't destroy your family. You did it when you decided your daughter was a burden to be rid of for 2 weeks for your own pleasure." "What?" Pearl jumped up. "Woodrow never said that." "Yes." I kept my gaze on Woodrow, who had turned even paler. "I heard you talk the night before you left. He said he wanted 2 weeks of normalcy without the constant reminders that your daughter would never be normal." Pearl turned to her husband, a mute question in her eyes. "Is it true?" Woodrow opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Yeah, it was just a conversation. I was upset. You know how much I love Finch. No, I don't, Pearl said suddenly, and there was a new note in her voice, a hardness I hadn't heard in a long time. I really don't know, Woodrow. You hardly spend any time with her. You avoid helping her. You're always talking about sending her to a specialized school away from us. It's for her own good, Woodrow exclaimed. She'll get professional care there. And here, she'll get love, Pearl said quietly. And apparently her grandfather loves her much more than we do. There was silence. Finch looked from one adult to the other, her face serious and focused. I propose a compromise, Lawrence finally said, breaking the silence. Finch stays here with Mr. Atkins, but she sees her parents regularly. Let's say she spends weekends with you, wherever you decide to live. We can formalize this as a joint custody agreement to protect the interests of all parties. Pearl nodded slowly. That sounds reasonable. What? Woodrow turned to her. Are you willing to give up our daughter? I'm not giving her up, Woodrow. I'm recognizing that she might be better off here. This house is adapted to her needs. And my father. She looked at me with a new expression, something between respect and regret. My father has always taken better care of her than we have. Woodrow shook his head. That's crazy. I'm not going to discuss it. We're going to sue and get our daughter back. No, we won't, Pearl said firmly. I don't want a trial, Woodrow. I don't want Finch to go through that. And I'm not sure we'll win, all things considered. Woodrow stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. You're choosing his side? After everything he's done? I'm choosing Finch's side, Pearl replied. And if you really love her, you'll do the same. Woodrow clenched his fists, then abruptly turned and walked out of the house, slamming the door. A moment later, we heard him hailing a cab on the phone. Pearl took a deep breath and turned to Finch. Honey, do you really want to stay here, with Grandpa? Finch nodded. Yes, Mom, I do. But I want to see you too, and Daddy, when he's not angry. You'll see us often, I promise. Pearl leaned over and hugged her daughter. We'll find a new house not far from here. And maybe we can all be better. A more real family. I noticed that she didn't mention Woodrow in that promise and wondered if that meant the beginning of the end of their marriage. But now was not the time for such thoughts. Pearl, you can stay the night if you like, I suggested. We have a guest room. She shook her head. No, thank you, Daddy. I think I need to talk to Woodrow, decide what to do next. But I'll be back tomorrow to spend time with Finch if that's okay. Of course you can. It's your daughter, Pearl. It was never my intention to deny you the right to see her. Pearl nodded, her eyes moist. I know, Dad. I understand why you did what you did. I don't agree with the methods, but maybe you were right about the bottom line. She gave Finch another hug, then awkwardly hugged me and walked out of the house to join Woodrow, who was already in a cab. When they left, Lawrence gathered up his papers and got ready to leave. I think it went better than I could have expected, he said, shaking my hand. Pearl has been remarkably sensible. I'll draw up the joint custody papers and get back to you tomorrow. After he left, Finch and I were alone in our new home. She looked tired but strangely peaceful. Grandpa, are Mom and Dad going to be okay? She asked as I helped her get ready for bed. I'm sure they will be, sweetheart, I answered, though I wasn't so sure inside. They're adults. They'll figure it out. Aren't you mad at your mom? I thought about that question. Was I mad at Pearl? Yes, of course, for the way she treated Finch, for letting Woodrow influence her decisions. But at the same time, I could see something different in her today, as if the veil had fallen from her eyes. No, I'm not angry, I finally answered. I'm disappointed in some of her decisions, but I still love her. She's my daughter, just as you are her daughter. That bond can't be broken. Finch nodded, satisfied with the answer, and closed her eyes. I kissed her forehead and left the room, leaving the door ajar just the way she liked it. In the quiet of my new home, I sat in my chair looking out the window at the starry sky and thought about what had happened. I had sold the house I had built with Edith, the house where most of my life had been spent. I had gone against my own daughter, possibly destroying her marriage in the process. I took responsibility for a special needs granddaughter in my 78 years. But looking at Finch sleeping peacefully in her new room, I knew I had done the right thing. Sometimes you have to tear down something old to build something new. And maybe out of the rubble of our old lives, we could all create something better, a more real family, where everyone got what they really needed. It's been 3 months since Finch and I moved into our new home. Summer had turned to early fall, and the maples on Maple Street were beginning to turn gold and purple. Our lives gradually took on a new rhythm, calm, measured, and filled with small joys. The first thing I did after moving in was to hire a professional caregiver, Elaine Turner, a young woman with experience working with children with cerebral palsy. She came 3 times a week to help Finch with exercise and hygiene routines. This made my task much easier, given my age and disability. "Mr. Atkins, you wouldn't believe the progress Finch is making," Elaine told me after another session. "Her muscles are getting stronger and her coordination is improving. I think it's all about regularity and a positive attitude." I nodded as I watched Finch proudly show Elaine that she could now move objects from one side of the table to the other, an accomplishment that would seem insignificant to a healthy child but was a triumph for her. In addition to Elaine, I hired a special educator, Noah Wright, who came in on weekends to help Finch with subjects that caused her difficulty, especially math. Although Finch was exceptionally intelligent, her motor impairment sometimes prevented her from writing and drawing, causing problems with solving problems on paper. Noah suggested using special computer programs and adapted teaching techniques. In just 1 month, Finch caught up with her classmates in terms of grades and even surpassed them in some subjects. "Grandpa, look," Finch exclaimed one evening, handing me a clipboard. "I got an A on my science test." I hugged her, feeling overwhelmed with pride. "I never doubted you, sweetheart. You're the smartest girl in the world." Our house was slowly transforming, becoming truly ours. I installed raised beds in the garden so Finch could garden from the comfort of her chair. We planted vegetables and flowers together, and by the end of the summer we had our first crop of tomatoes and herbs, of which Finch was incredibly proud. A tropical fish tank appeared in the living room, another of Finch's hobbies that Woodrow had previously forbidden for fear of making a mess. I had installed a special filtration system that made maintenance minimal, and Finch spent hours watching the colorful creatures swimming among the miniature coral reefs. As for Pearl and Woodrow, our relationship was strained and complicated. For the first few weeks after the incident with the house, Pearl came to visit us every weekend as agreed. She spent time with Finch, helped with classes, sometimes stayed for dinner. Woodrow came less often, usually staying in the car or spending no more than an hour with Finch, finding excuses to leave. They rented a small apartment 15 minutes away, but as I'd learned from Pearl, they barely spoke to each other. Woodrow blamed her for giving up and allowing me to steal their daughter, and Pearl couldn't forgive his words about burden and normal life. In late September, there was a turning point in our relationship. Pearl arrived alone, unannounced, late at night when Finch was already asleep. I noticed her eyes were red from crying. "What's wrong?" I asked, letting her into the house. "Woodrow left," she answered, sinking down on the living room couch. "He packed his things and said he couldn't live like this anymore, that he needed a normal family." I sat down next to her, not knowing what to say. Part of me wanted to gloat. Woodrow had finally shown his true colors, but another part of me sympathized with my daughter, who looked so lost and alone. "I'm sorry," I finally said. Pearl shook her head. "You don't have to be. You were right about him. All this time." She was silent for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Dad, I want Finch back. I want her to live with me. I'm tense. Pearl, we've already talked about this. Finch is fine here. She's got everything she needs, specialists, an adapted home. I know, she held up a hand, stopping me. I'm not talking about getting her out of here. I'm talking about, she took a deep breath, to move here. To you, if you'll let me. I was stunned. Pearl, always so independent, asking permission to live under my roof? You want to move in with us? Yes. I've thought it over. The apartment Woodrow and I rented is too expensive for me alone. And I want to be closer to Finch. Make up for my mistakes, be a better mother. I stared at her, trying to see if her words were sincere. After all, she still had access to a significant amount of money from the sale of the old house. Pearl, if it's about money, I can help you find a more affordable place to live. It's not about the money, Daddy. She looked a little hurt. Well, it's not just about money. I really want to be closer to Finch, and you, to be honest. The last few months have made me rethink a lot of things. I've been hesitant. On the one hand, Finch would definitely benefit from closer contact with her mother. On the other, my life with her was finally back on track, and I wasn't sure I was ready for more changes. I need to think about it, I said finally, and talk to Finch. It's her house, too. Pearl nodded, understanding. Of course, I'm not rushing you. Just, think about it, okay? The next morning, I cautiously broached the subject with Finch about her mother possibly moving in with us. To my surprise, she reacted coolly. Would Mom live with us the whole time? She asked, setting aside the book she was reading. If we decide it's a good idea, yes. Finch thought for a moment. And Dad? No, just Mom. She and Dad decided to separate for a while. Finch nodded as if that confirmed some of her own thoughts. They always fight when they think I can't hear, she said with sudden insight. Dad says Mom spends too much time on me, and Mom says he doesn't love me at all. I was amazed at her powers of observation. Of course, Finch understood everything. Children always understand more than we give them credit for. So, what do you think about Mom living with us? I asked, determined to be completely honest with her. I don't know, she shrugged. I like the way we live now. You don't yell or cry, and you let me keep fish. Your mom won't scream or cry if she moves here either, I assured her. And the fish would stay with us. Finch thought again. Okay, she said at last. Let Mom move in, but only if she stops calling me poor thing every time I can't do something. I nodded, realizing what she was talking about. Pearl often showed excessive pity for Finch, which only emphasized her limitations instead of focusing on her strengths. I'll talk to her about it, I promised. So Pearl moved in with us. We cleared out a guest room for her, and gradually she settled into our routine. It hadn't been easy at first. Finch and I were used to a certain rhythm of life, and the presence of a third person was bound to change things. But in time, we found a new balance. Pearl got a job at the same school as Finch, which allowed them to travel together. She became more attentive to her daughter's needs, but, as I noticed, her motivation wasn't always pure. One evening, when Finch was already asleep, Pearl came over to me with a cup of tea and sat next to me on the couch. Dad, I've been thinking about the money from the sale of the house, she began cautiously. There's quite a substantial sum left, isn't there, after buying this house and all the specialist costs for Finch? I tensed. Yes, there was enough left over, but that money is meant to secure Finch's future. For her education, for medical care, maybe for the special equipment she'll need as she gets older. Of course, Pearl agreed hastily. I was just thinking, I'm her mother. Shouldn't I have some control over those funds? That was it. I felt a familiar disappointment rise up inside me. All this time I'd hoped that Pearl had really changed, that she genuinely wanted to be closer to her daughter. But money still seemed to play a part in her motivation. Pearl, I said as calmly as I could, I've appointed Lawrence as trustee of the trust set up for Finch. Neither you nor I have direct access to the funds. They will be allocated only for Finch's specific needs, as needed. Pearl's face changed, disappointment flickering into a strained smile. Of course, Dad. I was just asking. It's a reasonable precaution. Something changed between us after that conversation. Pearl became more distant, stayed late at work more often, spent less time with Finch. I noticed that she began to talk to Woodrow on the phone more often, though she'd refused to talk to him before. One day, coming home from school earlier than usual, Finch heard her mother talking to someone on the phone in the backyard. "Grandpa," Finch said as Pearl left to go to the store. "Mom was talking to Dad about the money from the old house. She said Grandpa hid it, but she's working on getting access to it." I felt my heart clench. So all this time, the moving, the ostensible concern for Finch, it was all part of Pearl and Woodrow's plan to gain control of the money. I was disappointed, but not surprised. Deep down, I always suspected that Pearl hadn't changed as much as she wanted to show. "Thanks for telling me, Sunshine," I said, trying to make my voice sound normal. "Don't worry about it. I'll work it out." That same evening, I called Lawrence and explained the situation. He confirmed my concerns. Pearl had recently approached him with questions about the possibility of taking control of the Finch trust as her mother. She argued that she lived with Finch and cared for her, Lawrence explained. "But the trust is drafted very strictly, Hearn. She won't have control of the funds without your consent." "What if something happens to me?" I asked, suddenly realizing my vulnerability. I was almost 79, and although I felt fine, no one knows what might happen tomorrow. "In the event of your incapacity or death," Lawrence spoke softly but directly, "the administration of the trust will pass to an independent trustee we've already appointed. It's not Pearl. The funds would still be used only for Finch's benefit." I'm relieved. "Thank you, Lawrence. You always think a few steps ahead." "That's what you hired the old bore of a lawyer for," he grinned. "But, Hearn, what are you going to do about Pearl? She still lives with you, doesn't she?" That question kept me up all night. By morning, I'd made up my mind. When Pearl got home from work, I asked her to come into my office to talk. Finch was in class with Noah in her room, and we could talk freely. "Pearl," I began bluntly, "I know about your conversations with Woodrow, and about you trying to get control of the Finch trust." Her face froze for a moment, then she tried to laugh. "What are you talking about, Daddy? What kind of talk?" "Don't, Pearl. Finch heard you talking, and Lawrence informed me of your visit." Her face changed, the mask of friendliness fell away, and I saw the cold calculatingness that had always been there, just well hidden. "So?" Her voice became harsher. "I'm her mother. I have the right to manage the funds intended for my daughter. Those funds are meant to secure Finch's future, not so you and Woodrow can buy a new house or go on another cruise." "Woodrow is remorseful." She changed tactics, her voice softer. "He's realized his mistakes. He wants to come back to us, to be a real family. A family that's only interested in money." I shook my head. "Pearl, I gave you a chance. I let you move here to be closer to Finch. I hoped you'd really changed, that you genuinely wanted to be a better mother. But you betrayed my trust." "Dad, that's not true." "I want you to move out," I interrupted her. "Today. You can see Finch like we agreed on weekends. But you're not living here anymore." Pearl stared at me, her face contorted with anger. "You can't just kick me out. I'm her mother. I can, and I do. This house belongs to me, and I decide who lives in it. You can pack your things and leave nicely, or I'll call the police." "You'll regret this," she hissed, standing up. "Woodrow and I are going to file for custody. We have rights." "Do what you want," I said calmly. "But remember that everything will come out in court. How you abandoned a sick child without resources. How Woodrow called her a burden. How you tried to get control of the money. Do you think the judge will be on your side?" Pearl didn't answer. She left the office, slamming the door loudly, and I heard her pacing around her room, gathering her things. An hour later, she left without even saying goodbye to Finch. That evening, I explained to Finch what had happened, sparing her feelings as much as possible. "Mom's decided it's better for her to live apart," I said, "but you'll still see her like you used to." Finch was silent for a long moment, then she asked, "It's about the money, isn't it?" I was amazed at her insight. "In part, yes. Your parents. They have other priorities." "They don't love me," she said simply, without tears, as if she were stating a fact. "No, sweetheart." I knelt down in front of her chair, looking into her eyes. "They love you, just not the way they should, not the way I do." "I know." She smiled and reached out, wrapping her arms around my neck. "You love me for real." That night, after Finch fell asleep, I sat in the chair by the window for a long time, thinking about what had happened. I realized that I'd broken my relationship with my daughter, and part of me grieved for that. But another part felt a strange relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Pearl and Woodrow had indeed filed for custody of Finch, just as they'd threatened. But as Lawrence had predicted, the court had quickly dismissed their suit, all things considered. They didn't even try to challenge the decision. They must have realized the futility of that route, or simply lost interest when it became clear they couldn't get the money. Weeks passed, then months. Pearl came to visit Finch a couple times, but the visits became less and less frequent. The last time she showed up was in early December, bringing a gift, a teddy bear that was clearly intended for a child much younger than 13, and informing her that she and Woodrow were moving to California. He had a new job, a promising one, with career advancement opportunities. "We'll be calling," she promised Finch goodbye. "And maybe you'll come visit us for the vacations." Finch nodded, but I could see in her eyes that she didn't believe that promise. And she was right. After Pearl left, we'd only gotten 2 phone calls and 1 Christmas card from her. Then we were out of touch. That should have made me sad, but in a strange way I was relieved. Finch and I were truly free now, free from manipulation, from false promises, from constant tension. We could just be a family, small, unconventional, but real. Finch continued to progress, both physically, thanks to regular classes with Elaine, and academically, under Noah's guidance. Her grades were top of the class, and her teachers noted her exceptional curiosity and determination. One evening, as we sat in the living room after dinner watching the fish in the aquarium, Finch suddenly asked, "Grandpa, do you regret selling that house?" I thought for a moment. "No, sweetheart, it was just a house. A real home is a place where you feel loved and protected, like we do here." She nodded in agreement. "Do you regret Mom and Dad leaving?" This question was harder. "I regret that your parents couldn't be who they should have been," I finally answered. "But I don't regret that now you and I can live our lives as we see fit, without constant conflict." "Neither do I," she said simply. "With you, I don't feel like an invalid, I just feel like a Finch." I smiled, feeling my heart fill with warmth. "You are just Finch, the most amazing, smart, and brave girl I know." She smiled back, and in that moment I realized that despite all the hardship and loss, I never regretted my decision. Sometimes it takes courage to change what seems unchangeable, to protect those who really matter. Sometimes you have to tear down a familiar world to build a new one, a better one. And looking at Finch's happy face, I knew we had built just such a world, imperfect, challenging, but our own, filled with true love and care. A world where my granddaughter could just be herself without labels or restrictions, where she was not a burden but a treasure, where we were a real family, even if it was just 2 people. After all, isn't that what family is all about? Loving and protecting each other no matter what. And even though it took me 79 years to truly realize it, better late than never. I did what I had to do. And looking at Finch smiling, I knew I'd never regret it.